Hello, everyone. I am here today with a video tutorial related to coding, and it's really a little bit more, I guess, intermediate level. So, I'll tell you a little bit about the recommended prerequisites once we get to the code part, but hopefully the concept itself will be easy to understand. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to be talking today, applies to video game programming, but also really to any software development. So it's what we call states or game states. So let's go ahead and get started and see what states are. So, first of all, I want you to think about when you are using a game or playing a game or using an application or any kind of software, um, depending on what you're doing or where you are in that game or software, what you can see and do in any particular part of that software changes depending on your current task or where you are in the flow of that software. So let me give you a couple of examples. So the main example that I would use is when you have different screens as you progress through an app or a game, right? So you might, for a game, let's talk about a game, for example. So, with a game, you usually start off with like a title or an introductory screen. And, there's usually a few things you can do. Maybe you can click a button to launch the game, or, you might have like a file select or something like that, right? And then you might have a level select screen. So now on this screen, it'll look different than the title screen, and the things you can do on that screen are different from the title screen. Then you have like the main gameplay screen. So if you think about like a really simple game, like those match three games or whatever, like Candy Crush or that sort of thing. That's the main gameplay screen is where you actually have the action of the game, what everybody really um, signs into your app to play, right? Or to do. Then, you might have like a game over screen where, as it sounds like, if you have run out of lives or chances, you have a different, maybe like a game over message, and then you have options maybe to go back and try again, or to go back to the home screen or something like that. And then maybe you have an ending screen. That could be like a good or bad thing. Maybe you, uh, you know, got like a good ending or a bad ending, or maybe it's just like the game credits or something like that. But all of these screens have different behaviors that they do, different behaviors that the player or user can do, and they all have something different that the user is seeing on the screen, right? So another way to think about these sort of the different phases or modes is that's basically like what a state is, right? When we're talking about game development and software development and computer science. That's the current condition of an app or game and all of its current objects. Or another way to think about it, like we said, is the different modes or phases of the app. All right. But in addition to screens, you can also have states that apply to different objects in your game or your application, right? So here I have an example. This is just an image that I got. I included the image creator and a copy or a link to the Creative Commons license, to give credit to the creator. So I did not create this image, but this is an example of a checkbox, right? So a user interface checkbox if you're on a website and you need um, to select different things with checkboxes. So the checkboxes can have different states, and you've probably seen this at some point. So you first might have an enabled state where You can click on the checkbox, and then maybe you've actually selected an option with the checkbox, right? So that will have a particular look. If it's disabled, you can't click on it or do anything with it, then it'll have a different look. It might be grayed out and the behavior might be slightly different, right? Um, you can't when you mouse over it, nothing happens, and when you click on it, nothing happens, right? Then if you hover over it, that's another state, right? So when it's hovered, the mouse cursor changes to like maybe like a finger to indicate that, okay, you can click on this, and the look of it changes. It might be highlighted or something similar to that. Um, and you can see here, basically, I'm not going to go through all of these, but each checkbox, it has a different state and a different behavior and look associated with that state. Okay, so um, UI objects like checkboxes and buttons are common examples of objects in an app or a game that can have states, right? Also, think about some of the games that you've played. So I'm going to use Super Mario Brothers. That is a popular game that a lot of people have played at some point. There's obviously lots of games, but most people have played at least one game or are familiar with that franchise. So think about um, your Mario player character, right? So as you go through the game, his state changes depending on things like what power up you've eaten or, maybe what level you're in, that sort of thing. So his appearance changes, the possible actions that he can take changes, and some of his traits change. So let's think about movement. So he can have several different movement states. So default, he's touching the ground, not moving, and he has a basic sprite image, right? Some of the actions, he can move, jump, maybe crouch down. Um, if he's moving left or right, that might be a different state. His sprite will change to a walking animation. If he's jumping, he's in the air, his feet are not on the ground, and he can only move left or right, and the sprite changes again, right? And then some of the actions that you can take change because you can't move down or crouch or jump again, right? Climbing, again, a different state. Flying, some games you can get a power up to allow him to fly. But again, you have different actions and appearances in each of these different states. And of course, Mario is famous for getting different power-ups. So you might have states associated with his current power-up level. If he's default, doesn't have any power-ups at all, he's pretty small and weak. He also loses life pretty easily, right? One touch from an enemy, and that's -1 life. And also in most games, if he's in that small default state and he jumps and hits a brick with his head, a breakable brick, the bricks don't break, right? But when he eats a power mushroom, he changes to a different state. He changes to Super Mario. Now he's larger. Now he can crouch down. Now if he gets hit, he goes back to a default state. So you see this idea of him transitioning or cycling through different states. And he can bust bricks now if he hits breakable bricks from below, those bricks will bust now, right? And then maybe you have Fire Mario. He's eating the fire flower. It's basically kind of a similar state to Super Mario, but upgraded because he can now throw fireballs. So he's got like an additional action, and his sprite again changes. So, uh, you know, so think about some of the games that you enjoy, some of the different objects, and some where you might see some of these states and how do the states of that object change and cycle through as you go through playing the game or using any software application. All right. So what is the point of using states? So states are like a really handy way to organize your code into sections based on the user's current place in the application's flow, right? So we're looking at this right now from a a coding perspective, when you're writing code. But you can also think of it from a design perspective too. Think about what are the different states that need to be in my game, or the different screens, or the different objects, and how they can change. So when you're just even planning out your game or application, you can also use states to think about how different objects in the game will behave at different points. All right. And as far as coding, if you plan out your states well, they can all be independent of each other, so that when you make code changes to one state, it won't impact other states in your code, right? And this can make it simpler to make changes into your game without introducing bugs, right? So if I'm in again, if I'm in like my Super Mario state, right, and I want to make some sort of a change to the code for Super Mario, if I'm organizing my code correctly, I can make the change just in that section of the code, in the Super Mario state section of the code, and hopefully my Fire Mario and my default states or other states should not be affected. Okay? Okay, so for today's code example, in this video, we're going to start out with just an overview of the code, and I'm going to show you the code example, and a brief look at the code, and then I'm going to do a follow-up video that goes into a deeper dive of the code. All right, so first of all, let's introduce what the code example is going to be. So we're going to be focusing on simple screen states, right? Like that first example we talked about. And we're going to be using a tool called MicroStudio. It's a free browser-based game development engine, so you don't have to download or install anything. It's all in your web browser, so as long as you have an internet connection. It also has its own custom programming language called MicroScript, which is similar to Lua. So it's pretty easy to understand just by looking at it, or hopefully. Um, it's also really easy to draw something on the screen without having to do a lot of complicated code or setup. So that's a couple reasons why I've chosen to do this code example in MicroScript today. And here's a link, microstudio.dev, if you want to check it out for yourself. And here's the link to the actual example that you can look at. And I'll also put this link in the video description as well too. All right, so before we get started with it, I will also say that, like I mentioned that earlier in this video, this is not quite beginner level as far as the coding. I would recommend to best understand this coding tutorial that you have a solid understanding of some topics like variables, functions, and conditional statements, right? So if condition A is true, then take actions 1, 2, and 3. Else, if condition B is true, take actions 4, 5, and 6. All right, so you might want to make sure that you understand those concepts. And you also might want to take a look at the Micro Studio tutorials. They got some pretty good official ones. So, all right. So let's go ahead and take a look at the example now. So I'm gonna take this out of full screen mode for a minute. Um, and let's go ahead and look at the example. So this is the link, the example link, the public link. So if you click on this, and again, this link will be in the video description as well. If you click on run, oops, all right, let me just reload this. Okay, yeah, this is what it should look like. So we have three screens that we're going to be looking at. I've added an introduction screen, a gameplay screen, and an ending screen. And to keep this example simple, it's just on each screen. It's just a couple of lines of text. So at the top, we've got the name of that particular state, that screen state, and then towards the middle of the screen, we've just got a message, right? Um, and if you click the A button, it transitions to the next state, right? And then once you get to the end, that's the last state, so you can't go any further, right? A couple notes in a real game or software application. you might not have states that go in such a straightforward sequence like this, right? So like the level select screen, you might come back to it from like the main gameplay screen. So it won't always be like a just straight go from one screen to the other in the same order every time, right? And again, like I said, this is a very simple example. So in a real life situation, your screens and states would probably be a lot more complicated than this. Okay. And now I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the code. Um, and let me actually go to a different window, where I've got this a little bigger. So this is my, um, development, window. So here I've got my script. And you could see that I've got a couple of possible states. I've got three states, just the text name for each of them. And in the update function, I've got it checks to see what the current state is, and then it calls the appropriate function to do the actions for the current state that I'm in, right? So if I'm in the intro state actions, I've got my code for that function, right? So it'll just draw, this is the introductory screen, right? And then it also checks to see, okay, the action that I can take here is checking to see if the keyboard, if the A button on the keyboard is pressed, right? And what will it do? It will change the current state, and it'll go to the next one. All right. So I've got functions for each of my states, my intro screen, my place screen, and my end screen. All right. So if you are pretty good with coding already, pretty comfortable, you can take a look at this at your leisure. And you can see an easy way to implement states. Um, you can also see, since I've got them separate, I can easily add something into the play screen state or any of the states, and it won't affect any of the other states, right? So that's just a quick overview of the code, and check back later because I'll do another video, follow-up video with a deeper dive into the code, if you want more explanation. Okay, so that's the end of part one for this video. Let me, just again quickly show you. If you're going to the public link, the public facing link where you don't have to be logged in, you click on the run button to see the example in motion. Press the A button to move through the states, and then you can also look at the code here. All right. All right, so that's all for part one. Thanks, and make sure you come back for part two. And also feel free to ask questions or leave comments, or if you want me to do any other follow-up videos on this, please let me know. All right, thanks, and I'll check in with you again later.